We do occasionally comment on the commentary of other people in the space.
Mm-hmm.
See my hands. This is the
Space.
This is
Final frontier. Yes.
And I couldn't help but be listening in, as I know Andrew was as well, to Mr. Simmons and Mr. Russillo, decided, for reasons that I can't claim to speculate why, they went through their top 40 players in the NBA. How should I couch this? So basically, it was like, if you need to win a playoff game right now, we're not talking about contract. We're not talking about who would you rather have for the next 10 years. It's like, you need a guy to win you a playoff game. Who do you want? And they went through the top 40.
It was more of a championship. If you're ranking this on who can help you through four straight rounds.
That's right. Who can get you through 4 rounds of playoffs? They
factored in health, which then led to a lot of contradictions throughout their list. But continue, John.
So Andrew messaged me, because we tend to text about sports.
Everything, yeah.
Occasionally. And he's like, you should make a list, because I think people should yell at you as opposed to Bill Simmons. That was what your text said.
It was, so for those on YouTube, they can see the cave has been stripped down. So anytime I'm awake, I've been packing and moving stuff. And I was listening to their pod finally, him and Russillo, from Monday, and I'm just getting increasingly more angry. It's like, John can do this better.
I gotta be honest with you. I only listened to it once, and I was like, not fully, like, I was focused. I was hearing what they were saying. I can't say, other than 1 or 2 things, which we'll get to, nothing was that egregious to me. So we can get into when we get to certain names. If there is someone, well, why don't we? Okay, so let's go through my list, because I made a list.
Yeah, go ahead.
And when we get to someone who you think was maybe egregious that they placed in the wrong place, or that I'm placing in the wrong place, you could let us know. So I did tiers just like they did. The one caveat, I don't know how to handle. They had this like bullshit. So I guess we should talk about this now. They had this bullshit like injury exception thing.
That's part of the issue I had. If you're gonna make LeBron's, well, this is specifically Simmons, where LeBron was 7th because of the injury concerns. AD was lower because of injury concerns, but Durant is just absolved of all injury concerns after the worst possible injury you can get in the sport, and is number 1.
So here's how I'm taking this. If you gave me you're like, okay, pick anybody, you could start them, but like, so for instance, Jamal Murray is going to appear on my list. Jamal Murray is obviously not playing basketball right now because he tore his ACL. But in like a theoretical imaginary world where I will consider, like, is this person more or less injury prone? Yeah, I think you could consider that. But so I'll get into, but I'm not going by like if the person happens to be injured right now.
Well, so, and I'll let you get to it right after I say this. Like, the injury aspect of this is like, you need to count on these people for 4 rounds, and not the shortened off season rigors that everybody is now injured. Like, Embiid.
Yes, exactly. I'm going by it as a normal season, normal run up, the whole thing. Okay.
So John Macri's top 40 in the NBA 40. Right now. They are.
Prepare to write things down and then yell at me later. So my tier 1, and this is, I grouped it this way. So these are all the players that I at least considered putting number 1 overall. That is what defines my tier 1. Like, I gave some consideration. So it is Kawhi, and this is a rough order, but it is in order. Kawhi, Steph, KD, made a last minute switch. LeBron 4, Luka 5, Joel Embiid 6, Nikola Jokic 7. That is my top tier.
It's solid. I know the order I might have switched around a bit, but those are the 7 in my opinion. And
Embiid, I want to put higher, but he is, of all those guys, him and a little bit LeBron and a little bit KD, because honestly, KD might have been my number 1, but those are my slight injury concern guys, and probably Embiid more than the other guys, because he hasn't shown the ability to stay healthy consistently. And also, and this is going to be a theme, I think, in this list, and has been a theme of my writing all week, and Jeff Van Gundy said it on the low post today. It's tougher to run like a championship offense through a big guy. It doesn't even matter if it's a big guy as dominant as Embiid or Jokic. It's just tough. So those are the first 7. You agree. Tier 2, guys that I really wanted to, that these are essentially tier 1 guys, but I didn't think about putting any of these guys number 1 overall. So therefore they end up down a tier. Dame, Donovan Mitchell, and then I moved him up at the last minute, James Harden. Thoughts?
I get it that Anthony Davis has had a bad injury. And AD, I think last year has shown, and when he's healthy has shown. So I guess you bumped him down a tier because of the injury concerns.
No, I did not. Okay,
then I think AD is above Harden and above Donovan Mitchell.
So here's my argument, and this has to do with another. Well, let me so tier 3 for me. Again, this is in order: Trae Young, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Anthony Davis, and then just barely sneaking in, although I don't say this with most conviction, Jason Tatum. Here's the thing. We're talking about a league where how are you generating offense? How efficient is the guy that is generating offense for your team? How much does your offensive generator help get good looks for other people on your team? And as we're seeing in the playoffs, like at the end of the day, it just kind of comes down to who your best guys are and how talented they are, because, the Clippers are starting to muck up some of the stuff that the Jazz are doing. And even when the Nets were healthy, the Bucks were having some success with stopping the Nets secondary guy. We don't need to get into that. Giannis is a finisher. AD is a finisher. They may be two of the greatest 5 finishers in the history of basketball, but you're not running. If you're running your offense through those guys, there is, I think, a ceiling on how far you could go. Whereas the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and yes, I'm including Trae Young there. If you run your offense through those first 11 guys, I think you got a shot at a championship. That's why I have Giannis and AD after those first 11.
I'm less bothered by the Trae Young placement on here. Like I texted you before when you had Trae Young above Giannis, I was like, imagine doing that a month ago. And,
imagine 3 weeks from now when we I can't believe I'm about to say this. Well, again,
it might be Trae Young versus Giannis for the trip to the finals.
Oh, how about Trae Young in the finals? How about James? Again, we're recording this before the Nets game. The Nets could blow out the Bucks tonight, and James Harden looks great. But let's say the Bucks end up in the Eastern Conference Finals against the Hawks. Are we positively sure the Hawks are going to win that series? I'm less bothered by the Trae Young aspect. I think AD is somebody you could run your offense through, because I think a lot of points throughout the bubble, they did run their offense through AD, and LeBron, just because of his reputation, won Finals MVP, but AD also averaged 31 a game. But series. You could do that because you also have LeBron there to predominantly run.
I'm not saying you don't need 2 stars regardless to win. Like you said, you will need. It's hard to run your offense through a big guy at this point, which is why, unless you're Jokic or to an extent Embiid, I just think AD, especially when you factor in his defensive ability, a peak AD, I think, is one of the better defensive players in the sport too. That's
fair. But so Giannis was the defensive player of the year last year.
Giannis, I think you're starting to see teams show his limitations, and part of it might just be how Bud is using him. But I don't think AD has I actually think AD has a jumper. I think he has a mid-range. I think the 3-point shot is inconsistent, but it's better than Giannis, whatever Giannis is able to do.
100%. And we should note Trae Young, I don't know what he shoot, 34% from 3 in the playoffs. He wasn't much better during the regular season. If his 3 gets to where everybody thought it would be, I'll bump him up to that next tier with Dame and Mitchell and Harden.
Okay, go to your next tier, because there's a guy that I think should be higher. You're on tier 4 now.
So tier 4 is, and these are guys who are just a little bit worse than the guys in tier 3. I don't know how else to say it.
Okay.
So Chris Paul, Kyrie Irving, Devin Booker, Ja Morant, and then the aforementioned Jamal Murray. who, for anybody who forgets, averaged 1 billion points in the bubble last year.
So I want to hear the case for Mitchell over Booker, because I would go Booker over Mitchell, or have them at somewhat of the close vicinity. I think if you swapped places, I think their teams are the exact same.
So Mitchell, the efficiency isn't really there that much as you'd like, although he's pretty damn efficient given how many shots he's putting up, and he's averaging 30 plus for the playoffs. He is, I feel like, a guy you could just put the ball in his hands and he's getting to the rim. Like, you can't stop him from getting to the rim, and he's efficient enough when he gets to the rim that it breaks whatever the defense is trying to do. And I don't think the Clippers are back in this series because of anything Donovan Mitchell isn't doing. I think they're back in this series because Mike Conley is injured. Mm-hmm. If Mike Conley was playing, I think we'd be looking at either that series being over or that series being 3-1. And I think the Jazz would be prohibitive, if Conley was healthy, prohibitive championship favorites. And I think that's on the back of Mitchell. And I can't say that I know for a fact that Devin Booker would be able to do the same thing, just because that's not really his game. His game is more like he's a little bit of a mid-range assassin still. Obviously, the three-point shot is very good, although he doesn't take. That's the other thing. Like, people, like, when you think of like these crazy, like Steph Curry, Dame Lillard, Kyrie Irving to a certain extent doesn't do it as much, but like crazy off the dribble three-point artists, that's not really Devin Booker. If you look at his assisted versus unassisted three-point percentage, it's not in the same vicinity, not near those other guys. He also doesn't take as many threes. Mm-hmm. And like in a league where it's like, okay, how much of a threat are you from outside? That's why I have Trae Young a tier lower, because he's like, that's why we said on this podcast, let the one option for the Knicks, let him fire away from three. So anyway, that's my tangent on why Booker is where he is.
Okay. I tend to lean Booker a little more. Maybe I'm a bigger fan of what I've seen him do. That game 6, when closing out the Lakers with 47 points was like, I think, a moment for him when he was no longer just a regular season assassin. He actually does have a playoff moment. Okay. Finally. It was a game.
It was one game.
And I think the efficiency number, I know it's one game, but it's a closeout game in the playoffs, which is what this argument is.
You know what? How about this? I have him at tier. I'll put him right after Tatum in tier 3.
That's the thing. I think to have him 2 tiers below Donovan Mitchell was like that's where I was side-eyeing. If he's just a tier below, then maybe if he wins a title, you can move
I'm going to push back on this just a hair more. Donovan Mitchell could run an NBA offense. We're literally seeing it. He's running an NBA offense against a team that is, if the Jazz aren't favorites, then the Clippers will probably wind up being favorites if they come out of the series on top. I think. I haven't seen Donovan Mitchell run an offense.
You mean you haven't seen Booker?
Sorry, Devin Booker. Yeah. Not to this. I don't know. Look, maybe it'll be egg on my face when he's raising an NBA championship trophy in a month and a half.
Which the Chris Paul part of that, fair is. So we're at tier 4 right now.
So we just did tier 4. Now we're up to tier 5.
And how many players have you mentioned?
I've mentioned.
You had 7-3.
So now I've mentioned 19 players, and now we're going to get to players 20 through 26 before I throw my hands up and I put the last 14 people in tier 6. So tier 5, and really take this order with many grains of salt. Paul George, Bradley Beal, Jimmy Butler, Julius Randle, Zach LaVine, De'Aaron Fox, and Rudy Gobert. And Gobert I put on here because I'm like, I guess he should be here. It feels wrong to not put him here.
It's purely a defensive thing. Like his defensive numbers and advanced metrics are unreal. His rebounding numbers are great.
But the threat of him around the rim is also a real thing. And even if he may only score 8 or 10 or 12 points in a game, that Jazz offense does kind of, but again, they've built the perfect ecosystem for, and this is I think goes through your Booker point. I have Mitchell so high because he's on a team that is built specifically tailored around his talents and Gobert's talents. So
fair. With Gobert, it's like, I think he's the evolution of whatever Tyson Chandler could be.
Sure, that's fair.
And you never called to play for Tyson Chandler, which is where
and they're never going to call a play for Rudy Gobert.
So that's where I'm fine with Gobert being a fifth tier, even though if anybody from Utah is listening or watching this, you feel he's continues to be disrespected, and that is your prerogative. Represent your guy. I think. I mean,
he's literally the only person. He's the only person in my top 40 that is not a guy who can go get you a bucket.
And you mentioned De'Aaron Fox on this list, right?
So that's the guy
and Zach LaVine.
Well, so LaVine, I feel very strongly about here.
Oh, I do too. This is where my issue with Simmons. He was like, "Can you finish 500 once, De'Aaron Fox?" Yet he had LaVine over him. He didn't have Fox in his top 40,
which is
yet
ridiculous.
LaVine was over him, and you haven't said Zion yet. And Zion Williamson also has not finished over 500. Once again, contradicts the sports guy's logic.
So I watched with my own two little eyes the Knicks completely not shut him down. I mean, he got whatever he got, 30 in those games.
Mm-hmm.
But when it came to nut crunching time, as they say, they were able to limit what Zion was able to do. And it's
that sentence is funnier when you look at the shirt I'm wearing. That's all.
Shout out to Manscaped.
Yes, our new friends, Manscaped.
Our new best friends. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm higher on Fox than consensus, and I'm also higher on LaVine than consensus. The reason, real quick about LaVine, I was making the list, and I'm like, shit, if LaVine was like on a good team, like, look at what he does, and then look at all the things that we continue to praise. Off the dribble, from deep, with efficiency, being able to get to the rim, being able to get to the line, being able to make the pass, kick out to the open man. Like, I know Zach LaVine still has that reputation of the guy who, like, he won't make the right play in crunch time, or like he'll put up the stupid shot. But when you look at the shit he's able to do, and again, if the question is, who do I want on my team to get me through 4 rounds in the playoffs? Once I get through those first however many 20 some odd guys, like, yeah, I'll take my chance with LaVine.
I agree. The 26 you've listed so far, I would have in a different order, but I think I agree on the 26. There isn't a person you haven't said yet that I would have like before any of these 26.
Which gets us to the last 14. And again, this is hard, but I feel I'm gonna say a couple words about a few of these guys, but let me just read off the names. I had no idea where to put Klay Thompson, so I'm putting him here. Godspeed, Klay Thompson. Go get healthy. When he's healthy, he's absolutely part of this. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. Bam Adebayo, Karl Anthony Towns, Ben Simmons, Jaylen Brown, Domantas Sabonis, Kyle Lowry, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Chris Middleton, CJ McCollum, DeMar DeRozan, Tobias Harris, Brandon Ingram, and in 40th place, a tie between, wait for it, Drew Holiday and Derrick Rose.
Did I miss when you said Zion? You said Zion, right?
Oh, did I not write Zion down? Zion should be in here. So in that case, then there is no tie between Drew Holiday and Derrick Rose.
It's Zion. Okay.
Zion is.
I didn't know if I missed you saying Zion. So
no,
yeah.
I think it was because I assume I was back and forth between him for tier 5 and tier 6, and so I will put him at the top of this tier. So to Zion be clear, before Klay.
I think you'd agree. Zion is like 2 years away from going up a couple tiers.
I think
the right situation. Like, it's the one thing I did agree with Simmons on in this pod. If the Pelicans had pulled the trigger on a Chris Paul trade, why couldn't they be having the same season that Phoenix is having?
Like, I think they've done a terrible job of constructing the Pelicans team, as we've talked about on this podcast.
Agreed.
And there's a couple of guys in here that I want to say something about their situation. Ben Simmons looks like he maybe shouldn't make a top 80 list the way things are going in that series right now. And yet, if you gave him, quote unquote, his own team and you built that team around him, I think he'd probably be closer to the top 20. So I don't know what to do. So I'm putting him in this last tier.
So I was on FaceTime with Jeremy last night. We were going over some summer league stuff, John. And it was during the fourth quarter of Hawks Sixers. And at a certain point, like we're both watching the game in our separate locations. I just say to him, like, why is Ben Simmons on the court? Like nobody's making shots right now, so it's not like.
Well, it's not that for defense because he's the best perimeter defender. Arguably, he's the best perimeter defender in the league.
But as a result, when you need a bucket, you're playing 4-on-5, and if Embiid isn't scoring, then you're not getting that bucket from Ben Simmons.
Yeah,
you almost wonder like that. That is a terrifying limitation from him.
If they lose this series,
there'll be a ton of Monday morning quarterbacking the Sixers.
Well, forget that. I'm really interested to see what the Sixers do.
Okay.
Just because it doesn't make sense. Like Ben Simmons should be running a team. He shouldn't be. Again, I'm parroting what others have said on national podcasts this week. He shouldn't be hanging out in the dunker spot. Waiting for what I don't know. But anyway, I couldn't in good conscience not put him in this tier. So a couple other guys that I want to touch on.
Your honorable mentions. Okay.
So I guess now my honorable mentions would be, so Draymond Green is someone I thought of. He can't make a.
As you say, you want to talk about offensive limitations.
He can't make a basket right now. And so then I guess my first two cuts would be Jrue Holiday and Derrick Rose. I'll catch shit for Jrue. Jrue Holiday in these playoffs is averaging 14 points a game, shooting 25% from three. Seems afraid to take shots at times. He gets to the line a grand total of two times a game. He is, for his career in the playoffs, a 16-point per game playoff guy. Now, granted, he did have the first round series in which he eviscerated the Blazers and Damian Lillard. That will always exist. He averaged 27 points a game in that series. That is a thing. It was also 3 years ago. He's now 30. Been in the league for next year's gonna be his 12th year. I'm sorry, but there's a lot of guys who are. I mean, I know he might be the best guard defender in the league, but he's not creating anything. He doesn't really finish. He'll hit a three, he'll hit a long two every now and then. I don't know why he automatically deserves to be on this list. Meanwhile, I just watched Derrick Rose be the best player in a playoff series and have zero qualms about all right, you want to give me the rock? Sure. I'll go and get you a bucket.
It's funny. I think going into this Nets Bucks series, we all looked at Jrue Holiday over Bledsoe as the Bucks. This is the Bucks missing piece. This is what will put them over the hump. He can guard Kyrie, or you could switch him on to Harden. Then Harden went down, and it's almost as if what you got Jrue Holiday for hasn't been as necessary, and it showed more of his limitations.
But but this goes back to the Giannis Anthony Davis discussion. They need a person to be in charge of the offense. Giannis shouldn't be in charge of the offense.
Which lets you know. We'll see what happens in hindsight, because we could be sitting here and they've beaten the Nets.
Could make the fucking
they
finals.
Could win the championship with this roster. So it's like we're saying what their limitations are, but they might win the title anyway.
I mean, let me rephrase that. I do not think that they're going to beat whoever comes out of the West. But they can make the finals.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on what happens.
I agree.
So look, if there's, I went through this a couple times. I don't think I've missed anybody.
Well, you didn't say Jaylen Brown, which I agree with is in the top 40.
No, I said Jaylen Brown.
Oh, you did? He's in your tier 6.
He's in my tier 6, yes.
Okay. Then you didn't say RJ Barrett. What the hell, John? How many more times are you going to disrespect Rowan Alexander Barrett Jr.?
I think there's a chance maybe he makes tier 6 next year.
Tier 4, John.
Or tier 2, excuse me. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Respect on his name.
I need to see him. What do I need?
We don't. No, it was a joke. We don't have to.
Okay.
You don't need to see anything from RJ Barrett. Just continue to improve on our now 20. Happy birthday, RJ Barrett.
Happy birthday, RJ. Yes, only 21 years old.
There you go.
He'll be fine.
Drink some of John Scotch on us. There you go.
Are there any? Is there anybody else that I thought about including? Just really quickly.
Tobias Harris wasn't on any tiers.
No, he
right?
was.
He's on also tier 6. Okay.
Yeah, I put Tobias in towards the end of tier 6. Yeah. I didn't include Russ. I'm not a Russ guy. I've never been a Russ guy.
That's the big one then.
He's not I think there's an equally high chance he loses you a playoff game as he wins you a playoff game.
I think you've seen him lose more playoff games than you have seen him win playoff games.
Seen him lose quite a few
Evident by
games.
the fact that once Kevin Durant left, the Oklahoma City Thunder couldn't get out of the first rounds, even though he was an incredibly great, as far as statistics go, regular season performer.
Yeah. No,
I think it's a solid 40. And for those of you watching on YouTube, you'll see that I've inserted the graphics of all the tiers.
Oh, are you going to do that?
I am. This is me producing on the fly, but people will see what I've done. You can see the full graphic. We'll also have it tweeted out today, so you can yell and comment, or whether you agree or disagree with John's top 40.
Conley, I feel like it's recency bias, me not including him, but he's also 30 whatever years old, and like he's obviously this is not the first time he's broken down recently.
Mm-hmm. I think the last thing we should say, no Kemba Walker, true.
No Kemba Walker.
The last thing we should say, because we got to get to the interview.
Yeah.
It's just fascinating how like Luka doesn't have a teammate on here, and this will lead into obviously the Athletic article. We have Mike coming on again next week to talk about how, one former unicorn or unicorn 1.0 can't crack. Would you have him in your top 50, John? At this point?
No, I don't know that I'd have him in my top.
Here's a better
75.
question. Based off of what we saw this season and that playoff series, would you have Tim Hardaway Jr. above him?
I'll tell you this. When I was like, there was literally a split second where I was making tier 6 and I'm like, Tim Hardaway Jr. should be here, right?
He looked really so much better than KP. But
he's a guy who, again, he'll win you 2 playoff games and then lose you 2 or 3 or whatever the next.
But the point is, for someone that was supposed to be Batman and then Robin to Batman when he went to Dallas, to now just be on the same par as Tim Hardaway Jr. is the most incredible twist of that story,
I think there's still more.
We can get more into it with when Bassett.
I'm excited
when Mike
for
comes
that.
back on next week.
Vooch, I did not have on here. I want to just shout out to Vooch. I don't want.
I could have predicted that, knowing your history.
I'm not. What do you want to say? I'm not a Vooch. Van Vliet. Van Vliet. I thought about briefly. And another guy actually.
No Tyler Hero. Yeah.
No Tyler. Another guy I thought very briefly about. People are going to yell at me for this one. Next year, I'll bet this guy will be on here. Anthony Edwards.
Ooh, okay. Oh, you had Cat in tier 6, right?
I did have Cat.
Okay.
I didn't feel great about it though. I don't know where I am on Cat. I'm not.
Want to talk about? Can you just be 500 once?
That's the guy you have that conversation.
Yeah. Look. Overall, I had no. Oh, where'd you have LaMelo?
I didn't have LaMelo.
So LaMelo's on tier 7. Which is everybody else.
I want to see. Let's see a little bit more.
So you had nobody from this draft class.
No, and the only person I had Zion and Ja from the last draft class.
Mm-hmm. All right, the 40. I think I agree with. I think there's just the order of the top 22 or so that I would switch around.
Okay.
Which this is the fun part of lists is they're personal. They don't actually matter at the end of the day.